Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. And today we finally get to explore the life of Edmonia Lewis. So, a couple episodes ago, I mentioned that I came across John Brown, who was an abolitionist, as well as John Mercer Langston, who was a lawyer and the first black congressman. I came across those two men because they were both actually a great influence upon the life of Edmonia Lewis, who was the first black woman to achieve international fame as a sculptor in the fine arts world. So we finally get to see how these two men influenced this woman's life, because it's crazy, like one doesn't seem to have anything to do with the other, but here they are all involved and mentioned in her story in a great deal. So Edmonia Lewis was born July the 4th, 1844, to a Chippewa mother, and her father was Haitian. She had one older brother named Samuel, who was her father's son with a woman of a previous marriage. Both of her parents died while she was a young age, and her mother's sisters adopted her and her older brother Samuel. Samuel was given the Chippewa name meaning sunrise, and Edmonia was given the Chippewa name meaning wildfire. Well, while she grew up with her mother's family, she was taught the traditional methods of basket weaving as well as embroidering moccasins, and they would sell these items at the local market. So when she turns 15, her older brother, who is now a gold prospector and eventually went on to become a barber, he finances her education, and she enrolls into Oberlin College in 1859. And 1859 is the same year that John Brown organized his raid on the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry. So that's our first clue as to how these two individuals have, how John Brown has a significant influence upon Edmonia Lewis. Well, Oberlin College, which I didn't mention in John Mercer's Langston's story, is the first interracial and educational college in the United States, and it was located in Ohio. It was founded in 1833 by Protestant evangelists who passionately believed in human rights. And within 2 decades, 1/3 of its students were black. So Lewis is enrolled at the same college as John Mercer Langston once graduated from. And not only that, but two of Lewis's classmates, Lewis Sheridan Leary and John A. Copeland, were members of that raid on Harper's Ferry. So John Brown's acts impressed her so much that some of her first drawings included likenesses of him. So her interest in fine arts was sparked by an elective drawing course she had taken at Oberlin. And in this class, she created her first rendering of a neoclassical sculpture, a genre that would ultimately become her signature style. Now, her story, of course, cannot be just a quick jump to fame, right? And she has some scandal involved in her lifetime. So while she's attending Oberlin, two of her white roommates accuse her of poisoning them. They suffer severe stomach cramps after returning from a sleigh ride, and they accused Edmonia of spiking some wine that they drank before this sleigh ride. And upon an exam, it turns out that the two girls had Spanish fly. Well, their accusations resulted in her dismissal from Oberlin as well as led to her arrest. There was a college trustee, a Reverend John Keep, and his wife. They came to her rescue, and they hired John Mercer Langston, who was a lawyer as well as an Oberlin graduate, to be Edmonia's counsel. So the town was not happy at all to hear that this black girl had supposedly poisoned these two white girls. And they tell the Oberlin officials and authorities that, listen, if you don't handle this girl, we're going to handle her for you. And they make well on their promise. They kidnap Edmonia, they brutally beat her, and they just leave her out to die. Well, she doesn't die, and her kidnappers are never arrested. So after she recovers from her beating, she actually still stands trial, and John Mercer Langston, who was said to be, a really good speaker, he's actually able to have her acquitted of the crime. She returns back to Oberlin, and of course, the students are giving her the side eye. The faculty is giving her the side eye, and she's kind of just becomes like the campus scapegoat. So if something happens, then Edmonia, was easy just to say that she did it. And she has 2 separate accusations of stealing art supplies, and on both accounts, she was found to be innocent. However, she was prevented from graduating from Oberlin when the head of the Oberlin Ladies Department refused to allow Lewis to enroll for her last semester. Well, Edmonia moves to Boston in 1863. She arrives with a letter of introduction from Mr. William Lloyd Garrison, and he is an influential abolitionist and publisher. She apprenticed under a neoclassical sculptor named Edward Augustus Brackett, whose bust of John Brown impressed her. And within a year of arriving in Boston, she opens her own studio. One of her early works was a bust of Colonel Robert Shaw, who was the leader of the ill-fated Black Massachusetts 54th Infantry. And we heard about this infantry before because John Mercer Langston recruited soldiers to join this regiment. So she also witnessed Colonel Robert Shaw and his men marching south from Boston. Her bust of Shaw sold nearly 100 copies and brought her to the attention of a sculptor named Harriet Hosmer, and he encouraged her to travel to Italy to further her art education. The profits from the sale of the replicas of the Shaw bust allowed her to travel to France and Italy in August 1865. And she really enjoyed Italy, and she actually ends up making that her permanent home. And she was quoted as saying it was a relief not to constantly be reminded of her color. While living in Florence in the mid-1860s, she expanded her knowledge of the neoclassical style and became acquainted with 2 esteemed American neoclassical sculptors, Hiram Powers and Thomas Ball. She relocated to Rome to take advantage of American art buyers who visit the city on the Grand Tour. In Rome, she shared a residence with a group of expatriate American artists, and with the help of one of the leading members of those artists, she obtained a studio space in the home of an American actress named Charlotte S. Cushman. Now, Charlotte was an astute businesswoman and took Lewis under her wing. She marketed the young artist as an exotic, self-taught naive. Now, during her first years in Rome, she reproduced one of her best-known works, which was Forever Free, which celebrated the Emancipation. Forever Free exhibited in Boston and brought attention from the editor of the Christian Register, Elizabeth Peabody. And Peabody commented on how well the sculpture was made, as well as Lewis's cultural background. Her comments drew curiosity and critical interest for Lewis. Lewis quickly established herself as a fascinating and enigmatic artist of astounding abilities, particularly to those who could not imagine a Black genius. Lewis was very aware of the reasoning behind her popularity, and she played the naive for her non-believing admirers. Americans clamored to meet Lewis and visit her Rome studio. They doubted a woman of African descent was capable of creating monumental stone sculptures, and they required proof of her abilities and demanded to see her at work. So, in order to quiet the rumors that she was a hoax, she welcomed visitors to watch her carve into marble. And this was very different because a lot of sculptors preferred to contract professional stone carvers to translate their clay models into actual marble. One of her sculptures of two infants, entitled Asleep and Awake, won a gold medal at the International Exhibition of the Naples Academy of Arts and Sciences. In 1873, she traveled to California to sell some of her works, and almost all of her work is bought that she brought to California was sold. And actually, one of her sculptures entitled Hagar, of the biblical story of the handmaiden of Abraham, was sold for $6,000, which was a large sum of money at that time. She was able to return to Italy and enjoy temporary relief from her financial woes. In 1872, she completed a sculpture entitled Old Arrow Maker that established her reputation as an international master on par with her most renowned contemporaries. Forever Free, Hagar, and Old Arrow Maker reflect Lewis's long-standing concern for the struggles of African and Native Americans. Lewis went on to complete at least 60 works of political, social, historical, biblical, and mythological significance. There is not much known of Lewis's last years, as abolitionist circles dwindled and the fashion for neoclassicism waned. So did her patron base and her popularity. She died in September 17th, 1907 in London of chronic Bright's disease. So that is the story of Edmonia Lewis, and what a trip that was. So we got to learn how John Brown influenced her work. She actually was able to go to class, to have two of her classmates be involved in the raid on Harper's Ferry, which was very cool. And then, thank God, we have John Mercer Langston, who comes to her rescue when she's accused of pretty much attempted murder by poisoning these two young girls. So her life was full. She had a really full life of adventure and scandal, and she got to travel, and she really made a name for herself. And like I said, she's achieved international fame. So if you are creative or in the arts world and are familiar with the story, or wasn't familiar with the story, we've got to learn a part of art history as well today. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you again next Monday. Bye.